she say go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, very good. Good morning. Welcome to Thurston County Board of County Commissioners. We have a special briefing here with regarding treatment sales tax, advisory committee appointments, and community grants. Carrie Hennon is here, our program manager for treatment sales tax. And we have, my name's Ty Menser, chair of the board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards and Commissioner Carolina Mejia, as well as our county manager, Ramiro Chavez. And Ramiro, I'll pass this to you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner, before we get into the specifics of this item, can you give me a couple minutes to address an email that we received from a citizen this morning?
Sure.
All of you received an email from a citizen this morning. It was encouraging for you to cancel all those meetings because the documentation supporting all the agenda items that you're going to be discussing all day have not been available to you. That documentation has been available to the board via the SharePoint. That's the internal website. And we met internally with your assistance. If there is a need for those to be printed prior to any meeting, we'll work with your assistance on those terms. And I'd just like to clarify, based on the direction that you provided to me last Friday, that your intent is to make those documents available to you prior to any meeting. Those have been made available to you more than 24 hours in advance. We'll continue to improve the system, and we'll continue to make sure that those documents are available to the public prior to the beginning of every briefing that you have today, and we have done so already. So that is my 2 cents on that aspect. Thank you. So today, you will hear from Carrie Hennon, is the treatment sales tax grant and some perspective from the advisory committee. Carrie?
Commissioner Menser?
Yes, sir.
Could I ask the county manager something on this last topic he addressed?
Sure.
I think the complaint, from the way I looked at that this morning, is that it's not that we didn't get the information, it's just that the public does not get any information prior to the meetings. Now, I don't know what the legality is as far as keeping the public informed about what we're doing, but I do personally believe that we are obligated to let the public know everything that we're doing for the sake of transparency. So I don't know where we're at on this whole thing, but I'm not advocating that we cancel the meeting necessarily because I don't know the legalities of it. But regardless of the legalities, I would like to make sure that whenever possible, the public is allowed to see the same information that we're going to be discussing at an upcoming meeting at the same time that we get that information prior to the meeting. So that's my preference, just so that the public can have input.
As I stated, Commissioner, we made those documentations available this morning to the public so they can follow along in every single meeting that you have today. And as I recall, your direction to me was to make sure that you, the Board of County Commissioners, have enough ample time to review the documentations which have done it. If you have need a printed copy, we'll work on that. And we'll continue to make those documents available to the public prior to the beginning of every meeting.
Well, to me, that's not sufficient to give the public time to review a particular issue they might have a concern about, in which they might want to contact one of their commissioners and express that concern. They can't contact us while we're in a meeting. So if they get the same information at least 24 hours ahead of time, they then can contact their elected representative, and I think it goes a long ways towards us having a very open and transparent government for our public. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'll probably be making a motion to that effect at some point in time, but I don't want to hold up Carrie on her presentation here for now.
So, and again, I want to argue at this point, but there's nothing illegal about you conducting these meetings today, Commissioner. Absolutely nothing illegal. All the agendas have been posted 24 hours in advance, and that's the legal requirement.
Okay, I'm not saying there is. I just want to be as transparent as we can be.
No, you made an argument that perhaps it was illegal, so, and I'm trying to clarify that it's not.
Okay.
Anything else on this topic?
No, sir. Sorry, we take a little time of your time, Carrie.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Carrie Hennon, Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. I manage our treatment sales tax. So just kind of the 30,000 foot view, treatment sales tax is a 0.1% portion of our local sales tax. It's optional for counties to collect this sales tax. It's been collected in Thurston County since about 2008 or 2009 when it became available per state law. This funding is earmarked by state law for mental health and substance use disorder treatment and related services that support mental health and substance use treatment. The statute also speaks specifically to the operation of treatment courts like mental health court, veterans court, DUI court, drug court, et cetera. So TST is, I call it small but mighty, so smaller than some of the larger fund sources that go into publicly funded behavioral health, such as federal Medicaid funding or state general fund, but we are able to use this funding in different ways, different rules, and TST fills a lot of gaps in our community. So I kind of have two separate topics for this briefing this morning. They are all related, but one topic relates to the membership of the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee, and the second topic relates to our upcoming community grant request for proposals process. So I was planning to start with the advisory committee. So per county ordinance, there is an advisory committee comprised of 9 community members appointed by you all, the Board of County Commissioners, and their role is to make a non-binding recommendation to the BOCC about the allocation and use of TST funds. And they work really hard. They review a lot of data. They go to a lot of meetings. They ask a lot of questions, and they come up with sort of a full package of, if a certain amount of TST funding is being requested, how should that be allocated? So we have sort of a rotating process where every year a couple members have terms that end, and so therefore we need to fill new seats every couple of years. So is it okay to share my screen with one of the handouts?
Yeah, you should be able to, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 members whose terms are expiring in March. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this handout lays out who's currently on the committee, whose terms are expiring, and then we did do we kind of broadcast widely requests for new applications. We got some great community interest, so I wanted to walk through all of that with you, and then it will be up to you, of course, who is appointed to fill these upcoming vacancies on the committee. So this first table at the top of the page shows who is currently on the committee. It has been a great group of very committed, very passionate individuals with a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives. And I listed them sort of in order of when their terms end. And you will see the first 3 members listed on that committee have terms that are ending next month. So Skip Steffen, who has been on the committee since its inception about 6 years ago. He's currently the director of Olympia Union Gospel Mission, so works on all kinds of issues of homelessness in Olympia. Marilyn Roberts, who works with NAMI and has been a great advocate for families of individuals with mental health challenges. And then Glenn Dunham, who formerly was the police chief in Yelm and has done all kinds of other exciting things in his career. So all 3 of them have terms that are ending. So knowing that we had people who were rotating off the committee, we put the application process in December and January, and we got, as I said, a lot of great community interest. I almost wish we could include all of these people on the committee, but I don't think we need a committee of 12 or 14 people. So one of the members whose term is up is requesting reappointment. That is Marilyn Roberts, and the county ordinance governing the advisory committee does allow for that. Many members in the past have requested that, and generally the board has reappointed those members. So Marilyn has requested reappointment, and then we had 6 new applicants, and I wrote, I tried to boil down their full applications, which you should have also received in your packets, to some kind of highlights of their experience and the background that they would bring to the committee. Again, really great group of people with a lot of really impressive background. So we had Robert Almada, who's the current Lacey police chief, express interest in participating in the committee. I know he has talked to the city manager, who has cleared his request to be involved in this committee. Next person on the list was Joan Halverstadt. She had a long career as a school counselor and psychologist in the Rochester School District. Tor Johnson, whose application was not complete and didn't submit additional material. Marie Safira Madrone, who is all of the rest of the people on this list have some really strong behavioral health clinical background. So this applicant currently works for the Squaxin Island Tribe and has previous experience working with other community providers. Danielle Murphy is also a mental health counselor and substance use disorder professional. She's in private practice, but she's done a lot of community mental health work in the past. And then Cassia Rangan, who works at the state level on a lot of adult and juvenile criminal justice issues, and particularly has expertise in sex offender treatment and issues. So, great applicants. And again, you should have their full application packets. So again, 3 people's terms are expiring. I did work with kind of a subset of the current committee members to talk about, well, what skills do we have on the committee? What skills do we need on the committee? What would be sort of a good fit? So that group of current committee members came up with the recommendation that you see here. But again, I think would acknowledge that all the applicants would be great assets to this group. So the recommendation from me and from the current committee members would be, so of those 3 seats becoming vacant, reappointing Marilyn Roberts as requested, and then the 2 applicants whose backgrounds sort of seemed to fill some important gaps for the committee were Robert Almada and Marie Safira Madrone. Again, great applicants, and I think all of them would bring something novel, useful to the committee. The one thing I did want to flag with the application from the Lacey police chief is, as we do have sort of a strong conflict of interest policy, anyone who's affiliated with an organization that is actually receiving treatment sales tax funds is not supposed to be on our committee. It's sort of it's not just I'll recuse myself from those matters when they come before the committee. It's the way the policy is written is that they wouldn't be on the committee at all. So knowing that the board just approved a contract with the Healthcare Authority for law enforcement assisted diversion, knowing that the various police departments locally are likely to be involved in that process, and there is a component of TST funding, I think there's potential for conflicts of interest, and it sounds like a lot of that is yet to be determined. I did talk to a couple of the partners involved in LEAD, who've been involved in the planning, who were not terribly concerned about that, but I did want to mention that as a, could raise some possible issues going forward, depending kind of how all that plays out. So that's my summary of the applications, the recommendation. What questions do you have for me? I think I see Commissioner Edwards waving in the background.
Yes. Could you give me an example of what might be a personal conflict for the chief from Lacey?
So, so with the LEAD grant, there's also the, I think you approved a $900,000 grant from the Healthcare Authority. There's also in the county's 2021 budget, $300,000 in TST funding to provide matching funds in support of that grant. The details of how those TST funds will actually be spent have not yet been developed, or I think that group is kind of working on something to present to me to move forward with an agreement. If Lacey chooses to participate in LEAD, which it sounds like, I don't think that all of those agreements have been formalized. And if any of that TST funding were to flow directly to a police department, flow directly to the Lacey Police Department, then going to sort of the letter of the policy on TST conflict of interest, simply receiving TST funds would constitute a conflict. Exactly how those funds will be spent, again, I don't know, and I think is still kind of being developed, but it seems like a possibility. I don't know if others who've been maybe more connected to some of those discussions have thoughts on that.
Okay, well, and I'd like to comment on that because I don't see anything that's a personal conflict there whatsoever. And in fact, we want the municipal law enforcement agencies to participate in this program with LEAD. So I would very much like to see the chief from Lacey be participating in this. I just do not see any type of a personal conflict. I think we need the expertise of a active police chief, and I think we're darn fortunate that Lacey is willing to let that person spend a little time sharing their expertise with us. So I just can't see that it's anywhere near a conflict, and I'm going to advocate that we move ahead with the appointments as recommended in this paper by the existing membership of the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee.
I'm going to ask Commissioner Mejia. I see your hand, Robin. Commissioner Mejia, do you have a comments on that point or the recommendations?
No, I agree with the recommendations. I have no comment further than that.
Robin.
So I completely agree that it is extremely desirable to have someone from local law enforcement sit on the advisory committee. I would just like to clarify that the conflict of interest, as Carrie said, it's extremely a strong statement, and it is not just policy, it is actually written into the county code. And what it says is specifically, members or their immediate family will have no commitment, investment, obligation, or substantive involvement, financial or otherwise, in any agency contracting with, submitting a proposal to, or expected to submit a proposal to the Treatment Sales Tax Fund. So it is extremely restrictive, and what Elizabeth has said is that if we have someone who is employed by an agency of one of our cities, then that person would not be eligible to sit on the committee. Now, we did have this question come up when one of the members was law enforcement from the city of Olympia, and it was not Olympia Police that was receiving the treatment sales tax money. So we got around it that way. But since I'm not clear on exactly who the lead funding will go to, that's what Carrie's bringing up as the potential conflict with our county code.
Okay, Chair, could I respond to that?
Yes, and then I would like to make some comments. Go ahead.
I think this is extremely nitpicking. We don't know what we're going to be providing to, if you want to go by the letter of the law. But it is going to be very beneficial to have that type of expertise available. And I have no doubt that the Chief of Police from Lacey is not going to have any personal benefit in any way, shape, or form. And if that was to come up, I would ask him to recuse himself on a vote if that was it. But that is going to be such a slight chance of any type of interference weighing against the expertise that he can bring, and the fact that we want this LEADS program to succeed and we need an advocate. Anytime we can get an advocate to help the law enforcement agencies make a decision to participate with us. So I know that position, I think, was held prior from the city of Olympia by our past county commissioner, Hutchings. And I don't think anything amiss happened there. And I'll bet you I could find where the city of Olympia during that period might have benefited somehow from treatment sales tax in some fashion or another. So let's not nitpick this thing to death. We've got a great opportunity here to have some good folks on, and I'm encouraging my seatmates to support that.
So I guess I have a different perspective. It really doesn't have to do with the conflict issue. It really is about like having folks from the community versus having someone inside the system. My sense was that the Community Advisory Council was a place where voices, unheard voices from the community get to kind of convene and work through some of these issues. Kind of like the debate we had at Intercity Transit when we have 3 community seats on the authority board, and our county treasurer applied to be one of them. And he's a citizen, but we just felt that, you know, that really wasn't the intent. That didn't really meet the intent of the community seat on the Intercity Transit Board. Now, county treasurer doesn't necessarily play a role in county transportation policy, but that was just a consideration. Like, these seats are open for the community, and we felt like we should be like looking a little broader. Now, if we didn't have a slate of awesome candidates, I wouldn't have any heartburn over having. And as Commissioner Edwards said, it's always great to have the law enforcement perspective here. But I guess one of the questions I had is, if the alternate selection was a former counselor from Rochester School District, and I'm wondering, do we have any voices in this committee from South County folks? I know we've got somebody from Yelm stepping down, you said, Mr. Dunham. So will South County have any representation on this slate of folks if we don't select Ms. Halberstadt?
I would say probably no.
So I would say that would weigh very heavily on my consideration when you throw in the potential for conflict, and you factor in that Chief Almada is someone in the system, not really in the community, in kind of broad strokes. And we don't have anybody else from South County, and that person's application is really, really strong. My suggestion would be to have Ms. Halberstadt and Ms. Roberts be appointed.
So, Commissioner, may I?
Yep.
In light of the previous conversation, I will bring this item for your final decision on next Tuesday morning. That will be February 9th, 2021. And that will give you the opportunity to review the applications. And also that will give the opportunity for you to receive any feedback from any citizens who are watching. So I think this is good conversation. But again, I will bring this item for you final consideration Tuesday morning.
Sounds good. Anything else from the board members on that topic?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Terry, back to you for community grants.
Okay. Did that change to a different handout? Community that says community grants at the top? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So the vast majority of treatment sales tax funding is appropriated directly now to county offices and departments and the Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization as our partner in and kind of subject matter experts in this area. But there has been a long tradition of a smaller portion of funding that is allocated to the community through a request for proposal process that has happened either annually or sometimes every other year, kind of depending on budget cycles. So in the board's adopted budget for 2021, there's $250,000 that is set aside for this community grant request for proposal process. We are set to release an RFP that would be integrated with the housing funds that are going out that I think Tom Webster came and talked to you about at agenda setting earlier this week, kind of requesting permission to release that RFP. So we would use the same online portal, some of the same RFP questions, some different questions, different selection process, but kind of same timeline so that the community knows when to expect funding from PHSS. And what I wanted to ask you today is whether you want to set any priorities or parameters related to that process. So I can give you a little bit of background on who's being funded now, how this has looked in the past, and then just get any guidance from you about how you'd like to see that request for proposals process shaped. So I've listed here the current recipients of the funding. Catholic Community Services is receiving funding at their Drexel House 2 facility, which is permanent supportive housing for veterans. Capital Recovery Center is receiving funding for a justice outreach specialist, kind of working as a liaison between our criminal justice system and the Butte Clinic. And Family Support Center of South Sound is receiving funding for kind of treatment-focused case management services at its family shelter, Pear Blossom Place. In the past, I've listed several other recipients. This is not necessarily a 100% comprehensive list, but these are kind of examples of the type of organizations that might be interested in this funding. So again, this would be an RFP process. At points in the past, I think there was one year where the board said we would like to focus this funding on youth programs. There was another year where the board highlighted veteran programs, and some years the board has just said anything that's eligible for TST. So you have that option. I've listed here, ideas that you could focus on, or could come up with your own ideas, obviously. Personally, my recommendation would be not to identify a specific population area or a specific focus, mostly for the reason that, again, this is quite a small slice of overall TST funding. And from the kind of community perspective, I think as an example, if the board were to say, let's focus this funding on youth, I think you may have providers serving adults in the community who see gaps, who see needs, and who don't have the opportunity to directly ask for this type of funding very often, if at all, who might be frustrated and not be able to highlight and bring forward that need and their proposal for how to address that need. That's my personal perspective. You could direct me to have an RFP that does focus on one of these subpopulations. So that was one question. The second question, and I have a perspective here as well, of course, relates to the duration of the contracts. In general, we have done this process every year and written 1-year contracts to go along with it. The last time around, it was sort of synced up with the biennial budget from the board. So the recipients now are toward the end of a 2-year contract. Community agencies very much prefer longer term funding for all the reasons that are fairly obvious: stability of funding, the challenges of hiring and starting up a new program and trying to develop a track record for that program all in a 12-month period is challenging. That said, because the board adopted a 1-year budget this time, it feels a bit cleaner to me to do 1-year grants this time around. But it is, of course, possible to write contracts that say, you know, this is a 1-year contract that may be extended for X period contingent on funding availability. So I would be happy to accept your guidance on all of these issues. I guess one other thing that I didn't put on this list, at points of that $250,000, I think a couple times the board said, we need to make sure that at least X of that 250,000, at least 100,000, for example, goes to recipients who have never received TST funding in the past, to make sure that this is used as sort of seed money for new programming. So that's another kind of parameter or priority that could be written into the RFP process. So any priorities or parameters from the board in advance of releasing this RFP is what I wanted to discuss with you today.
Okay, so there's a couple kind of topic areas there. Commissioner Mejia, anything, questions, comments?
So just for my own background knowledge, how are the recipients chosen each year?
So yes, good question. So again, we will release a request for proposal. They'll submit their proposals. What we've done in the past is convene sort of an ad hoc committee that includes a few members of the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee. Generally, it hasn't been that whole committee for this process. That whole committee works on the big county budget process, but for this slice of funding, it's usually just been kind of 2 or 3 of those members. And then we've also included in that some county subject matter experts. So some of the partners who receive who operate treatment sales tax funded programs in the county. So we've generally had a committee of maybe 6 or 8 people reviewing those proposals. We, score them according to community need and expected impact, et cetera, capacity to carry out the program, et cetera. And then I would come back to you with a recommendation in, a briefing that looks much like this. So I would come back to you with a recommendation from the committee about, how to allocate that $250,000, and the board would make final decisions based on the information presented.
Thank you. Yeah. I have no further questions, Chair.
Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
No, sir, I'm good. I'm all about going along with what Carrie says on this.
Okay.
Good job.
Carrie, I agree with you on not having a focus area identified. That makes sense to me for the reasons you explained. I guess I'd look to Robin. Robin, do you have any perspective on this 1-year versus 2-year grants? I remember the debate, and there was a good reason to switch to 2-year. We did that, and since Carrie's rationale is kind of like she said, cleaner, lining up with the one single year budget that we did, does that resonate with you, or is that not a big consideration from your perspective?
I think that the original reason that we went with 1-year grants was to be able to spread the money around, if you will. The thought was that these community grants would be somewhat of incubator type programs. And then once stood up, they'd be able to seek other funding or get into the regular treatment sales tax process. But what we have actually found is that it doesn't work that way. These programs that have been selected in the past are hard pressed to find other types of funds. And we see them coming back asking for additional years. So I think if you want to stick with the incubator type thought, we can manage 1-year grants, but 2-year grants are much easier and give more stability to the recipient.
And that doesn't feel, it's the fact that we might launch a it might be out of sync with our biennial schedule is not a problem.
I don't think it is. If we do indeed go back to a biennial budget, then we can consider how to align them a little better. But basically, the amount of money that's available for these programs is part of the base every year.
Okay. Carrie, does that make sense?
And also,
That's, yeah.
if I may, also you may recall when you look at the 10-year financial plan for the TST, it does include a $250,000 community grant for the next few years. So that gives you additional perspective if you want to consider 1 year versus 2 years. So, and also, Carrie, can you provide a little history as to the amount of the community grants? Because over the years, it started at one level and then increased because the demand was increasing, and the board has increased over the years to what is now $250,000.
Yes, Robin might know this better than I. So I've been here almost 4 years now, and I think when I came, it was like $240,000, and then went up to $250,000. But immediately prior to that, it had been at like $100,000.
That's right.
Say just 5 years ago, it was $100,000, and then
I think it started at 50.
It started at 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's grown over time because the need is great and there's money in the fund.
Right.
As far as 1 year, 2 year, it really depends on what the board wants the strategy to be, if you will. If you want a strategy of spreading the money around to more providers and having more opportunities for finding innovative things, then maybe you go with a 1 year. If your strategy is more finding new programs and then providing them stability to be up and running, then you go with a multi-year.
I know I recommended a 1 year, but from a agency perspective, startup, a 1 year grant is very challenging. By the time you have your contract in hand, hire your people, train them, you're just about ready to apply for a new round of funding. I mean, you have maybe 6 months of operating before it's like, okay, I need to go find more money. So since Robin and Ramiro think it's workable with the kind of anticipated ongoing funding, and of course we write the contracts with the appropriate termination if the funding disappears language, it is very challenging to launch a new program with a 1 year grant, I think.
Okay, so we have 3 thumbs for 2 year grants and no particular specified focus. Carrie recommended that where we're at. I can't see thumbs very well on this screen, tiny little.
I'm fine with going along with Carrie's recommendation.
Okay.
Yes, me too.
Okay, so you've got direction there, Carrie. Thank you.
Okay. That's all I had for you today, which gives you the gift of time. The one other thing I would mention, so we talked about the advisory committee. On your calendars, I believe, for the February meeting of that advisory committee is an invitation to you all to come meet those folks. I know they would love to hear from the commissioners if you have any thoughts about vision for TST, the direction of the fund in the next budget cycle. So I hope you'll be able to, that's one of my committee members I thought made sort of a funny comment. It's on your calendars as a meet and greet. And she said, we don't need meet and greet, we need meat and potatoes. I really want to hear from the commissioners about what they want to do with this fund, where they want to go with it. So I thought that was, they will have questions for you, and of course, you know, just a good opportunity to see and chat with the individuals who are working hard on behalf of the county to make the best use possible of this fund. So hoping you can make it on, it's on the February 19th. I think it's on your calendars.
February 19th, PST advisory meeting. Yeah, okay. It's on there. Great. Thank you, Carrie. This is perfect because we have 10 o'clock board meeting and kind of back to back today. So let's just adjourn for now and reconvene at 10 a.m. for commissioner check-in. Thank you, Carrie.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.